Black waitress found a billionaire CEO crying alone. She did one thing no one expected. Why was the billionaire CEO crying alone? And what could possibly make a black waitress do something no one expected? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you love emotional stories filled with unexpected moments, powerful choices, and unforgettable human connections, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for being here, watching, and supporting the channel. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, what would you do if you found a billionaire CEO crying alone? Now, take a deep breath, settle in, and let's step into the beginning of this remarkable story. A sob slipped through the locked mahogany door after every guest had gone. Nora stopped beside the service cart, one hand wrapped around a stack of porcelain plates still warm from the industrial dishwasher. The Aurelia's private corridor smelled of lemon polish, extinguished candles, and the last pour of $12,000 Bordeaux. Beyond the frosted windows, Manhattan glittered against the black glass. Inside, the celebration was dying one sound at a time. 20 minutes earlier, Whitmore global executives had filled the private dining room with champagne laughter, congratulating Julian Whitmore on a deal worth billions. Now the jazz had stopped. Crystal glasses stood abandoned beneath gold pendant lights. The only sound came again, low, fractured, unmistakably human. Nora glanced toward the service elevator. The closing crew had moved downstairs. Security waited near the lobby. No one else seemed to have heard it. She set the plates down. The sound had come from the private room reserved for Julian. A room staff members entered only when summoned. Its brass handle refused her first turn. Locked. Nora raised her knuckles, but before she could knock, the latch clicked from within. The door opened barely an inch. No face appeared. Then it drifted wider. Half the recessed lights had been switched off, leaving the long walnut table divided between amber and shadow. Julian sat at the far end, still wearing the midnight blue suit photographed that evening by business reporters. His silk tie lay on the carpet. One cuff was unfastened. His untouched whiskey reflected a thin blade of light. The man who had commanded bankers, attorneys, and board members for 6 hours was folded over in his chair, his shoulders jerking beneath a jacket tailored to conceal every imperfection. Nora stepped across the threshold. Her rubber-soled shoes made almost no sound on the wool carpet, but Julian's head snapped up. His eyes were swollen. A wet track shone across one cheek. He wiped it away with the heel of his palm, too late to preserve the version of himself everyone else had applauded. "Who let you in?" His voice scraped against the silence. Nora looked at the object clutched between his fingers. It was not a contract or a phone. It was a creased photograph of a teenage boy standing beside Julian on a sailboat, both of them squinting into hard summer sunlight. The boy had Julian's dark eyes and none of his guarded posture. A black mourning ribbon had been tucked around one corner of the frame. Julian followed her gaze and turned the picture face down. The movement was quick, possessive, ashamed. "Mr. Whitmore," Nora said quietly. "I heard." "You heard nothing." He pushed himself upright, though one hand remained pressed against the table to keep it from trembling. The cold authority returned to his voice before it returned to his body. "Leave. Now." Nora knew the rules. A waitress did not question a billionaire CEO in his private room. She did not acknowledge his tears. She certainly did not remain after a direct order, not if she needed next week's shifts, next month's rent, and the health insurance tied to her hours. Julian reached for the photograph again, but his thumb stopped over the boy's face. His breathing shortened. His eyes fixed not on Nora, but on the dark window 30 feet away. She backed toward the door, her fingers closing around the brass handle. Leaving would protect her job. Staying could cost it. Then Julian whispered one word to the photograph, "Sorry," and Nora understood that the locked door had never been meant to keep people out. It had been meant to keep something inside. She did not close it. The brass handle stayed cold beneath Nora's palm while the air conditioning whispered through the darkened room. Behind her, Crystals settled against linen with a faint click. Julian had lowered the photograph, but his gaze remained fixed on the 30-foot window, where Manhattan glittered like a world that had no idea he was breaking inside. Nora had seen grief wear many disguises. Her husband's had looked like untouched coffee, unopened curtains, and shoes left beside the bed because moving them felt like betrayal. But this was different. Julian's champagne stood untouched. His words were precise. His shoulders were rigid beneath a tuxedo worth more than her car. Nothing about him suggested drunkenness or a passing collapse. Then his hand slid across the white tablecloth and closed around a silver steak knife. Not the blade. The handle. Still, Nora heard the message in the sudden quiet. "Put that down," she said. Julian turned his head slowly. The command in his face had returned, polished and familiar, but one tear remained caught along his jaw. "You were told to leave. I heard you. Then why are you still here?" Nora watched his fingers tighten. She did not rush toward him. She did not raise her voice or offer one of those polished sentences people used when they wanted pain to become less inconvenient. Instead, she released the door handle. The latch clicked behind her, soft as a decision. Julian's eyes narrowed. "Do you understand who I am?" "Yes." "Then you understand what happens when an employee ignores me." Beyond the wall, a service cart rattled down the corridor. Silverware chimed. Someone laughed near the ballroom, where his multi-billion-dollar deal was still being toasted beneath gold chandeliers. In this room, the scent of expensive steak had gone cold. Nora's next week of shifts passed through her mind. Rent, groceries, the insurance attached to every hour Aurelia gave her. She could still walk away with all of it intact. Instead, she crossed the carpet. Julian tracked each step, expecting intervention, perhaps pity. Nora offered neither. She stopped at the far side of the table and wrapped her hand around the back of the empty chair opposite him. "Don't," he warned. The word was quieter now. Nora pulled. Wooden legs scraped across marble, cutting through the room like a match striking in darkness. Julian flinched, and the knife handle loosened beneath his fingers. She sat, smoothed her apron over her knees, and placed both hands where he could see them. No touch, no performance, just another human being occupying the space he had tried to seal shut. "I'm not asking what happened," she said. "I'm not telling you it will get better. And I'm not leaving you alone with that knife." Julian looked down as though noticing it for the first time. His fingers opened. Metal met china with a small, hard sound. "You could lose your job. I know. For someone you don't know." Nora held his gaze. "I know enough." For several seconds, only the ventilation moved. Then Julian pushed the knife to the center of the table, beyond his reach. It was the first choice he had made that night, which did not serve the man whose signature moved markets. Nora reached into her apron pocket. Her phone rested there, warm from her hand, carrying a voice she had once been too afraid to hear twice. Julian noticed the movement. "What are you doing?" Nora set the phone face down between them. "Something no one did for me." Then she turned it over. A thin blue waveform trembled across the phone screen, the only movement beneath the amber pendant light. From the kitchen beyond the locked door came the muffled clatter of silverware and the fading scent of charred rosemary, while cold air slid across the polished walnut table. Nora entered her passcode. Julian's eyes followed her thumb. "Who is that?" "My husband." She opened a saved message dated nearly 3 years earlier. The file was 27 seconds long. Her thumb hovered above the play icon, and the skin around her wedding ring tightened. "He died before I answered this," she said. "I kept thinking I'd listen when I was strong enough." Julian glanced at the morning photograph near his hand. "You don't have to do this." "Neither do you." Nora turned the volume up and pressed play. A man's voice emerged through the tiny speaker, roughened by exhaustion but still warm. "Hey, don't call back if you're working. I just wanted to hear your voice, but I know you're carrying enough. Tell the kid I love him. And listen, you don't always have to be the strong one. Not with me." A breath. Fabric brushing against a microphone. Then, Softer. Come home when you can. The message ended with a click. No music followed. No comforting words rushed in to cover it. The refrigerator compressors hummed behind the wall, and somewhere in the empty restaurant, a glass settled against another glass with a faint crystalline chime. Nora left the phone where it was. Julian stared at the dark screen. Why would you play that for me? Because everyone sees your name before they see you. His jaw shifted. You don't know what everyone sees. They see a man who can survive anything. Nora folded her hands in her lap. So they make you prove it every minute. Julian's fingers moved toward his son's photograph, stopped, then closed around its silver edge. My board sent a grief counselor, he said. For 45 minutes. My attorney stayed in the room. That wasn't grief. No, that was risk management. The words landed without accusation. Julian looked toward the knife he had pushed away, then back at the phone. Nora could have filled the silence with questions. She could have asked how his son died, when the photograph was taken, why a billionaire had chosen a locked dining room instead of his penthouse. She asked nothing. Instead, she reached across the table and turned the framed photograph upright. The teenager wore a crooked tie and an impatient half-smile, captured in sunlight that no longer existed anywhere but behind glass. You can say his name, Nora said. Julian's throat worked, but no sound came. Or don't. You can sit here and cry until the lights come on. You can be angry. You can hate him for leaving and love him in the same breath. Her voice stayed level, though the last message from her husband still glowed on the screen between them. You do not have to make this look dignified for me. Julian's shoulders dropped by an inch. Then another. The photograph touched his forehead. The first sob tore through the room without apology, followed by a second, deeper one that bent him over the table. Nora did not reach for him. She did not look away. She simply remained in the opposite chair while the most controlled man in Manhattan stopped performing control. Minutes passed. When Julian finally lifted his face, his eyes were raw, but his hands were empty of danger. Evan, he whispered. His name was Evan. Nora nodded once, receiving the name instead of praising him for saying it. Footsteps struck the marble corridor outside, quick, hard, approaching. A key scraped against the lock. Julian heard it and straightened by instinct, one hand rising to wipe away the evidence. Nora caught his wrist before the mask could return. No, she said. If that door opens, I won't help you pretend this never happened. The handle began to turn. The lock clicked, and the private dining room flooded with cold corridor light. Aurelia's night manager stepped inside, his polished shoes striking marble as the scent of espresso and extinguished candles drifted behind him. His eyes moved from Nora's hand around Julian's wrist to the upright photograph, the phone on the table, and Julian's tear-streaked face. What are you doing in here? Nora released Julian at once and stood. The chair legs scraped sharply across the floor. Mr. Whitmore needed someone to stay. Mr. Whitmore ordered privacy. The manager crossed the room and snatched Nora's phone from the table before she could reach it. Its screen had gone dark, but suspicion had already hardened his jaw. Did you record him? No. Did you take photographs? No. He held the phone toward her without returning it. Then unlock it. Nora looked at Julian. The billionaire's fingers closed around Evan's photograph, bending one corner of the silver frame. His breathing was steadier now. His voice did not come. Nora entered her passcode. The manager opened the camera roll, then the recording app. No photographs. No secret video. Only a saved 27-second message bearing a date nearly 3 years old. The evidence cleared her of exploitation, but it exposed something the room's hierarchy considered almost as unforgivable. She had crossed a boundary no employee was supposed to touch. You entered a locked VIP room without authorization, the manager said. You remained after being dismissed. You placed personal material in front of one of our most important clients. I kept him from being alone. That wasn't your decision. His words landed with the clean finality of a slammed ledger. Nora reached for her phone. This time he returned it. You're suspended effective immediately. Leave your access card with security. Human Resources will contact you after review. The ventilation hummed overhead. Somewhere beyond the door, glassware chimed as the closing crew cleared tables worth more than Nora's weekly grocery budget. She slipped the phone into her apron pocket. I need those shifts. The manager glanced toward Julian, offering him the power to end the matter with one sentence. Nora followed his gaze. Julian's mouth opened. His thumb dragged across Evan's photographed face. Shame lowered his eyes to the white tablecloth, and the sentence died before it reached the air. That silence did what the knife had not. It cut someone else. Nora untied her apron slowly, folded it along its worn center crease, and placed it beside the untouched crystal glass. Her access card followed with a small plastic tap. No pleading, no accusation, just the surrender of the job that paid her rent, kept groceries in the kitchen, and carried the health insurance her child depended on. At the doorway, she stopped beneath the blue-white corridor light. You said his name when no one was watching, she told Julian. Now you're letting them punish me because someone is. Julian raised his head, but the manager had already stepped between them and motioned toward security. Nora walked out under her own power. The kitchen doors swung open ahead of her, releasing heat, garlic, and the metallic thunder of pans. Behind her, the private door closed with a padded hush. Julian remained at the table with Evan's photograph in his hands and Nora's empty chair across from him. For the first time that night, no one had left him alone. He had chosen it. And by morning, Nora's silence would cost her far more than his grief had cost him. At 7:12 a.m., 3 envelopes slid across the black glass desk on the 46th floor of Whitmore Global. Beyond the windows, Manhattan glimmered beneath a thin gray rain, while the ventilation system breathed cold air through a boardroom prepared for 12 directors and a decision worth billions. Julian opened the first envelope. Aurelia's incident report confirmed Nora had made no recording. The second contained a surveillance summary. She had left through the service entrance, spoken to no reporters, and contacted no one from Whitmore Global. The third held an unsigned confidentiality agreement and a cashier's check his attorneys had sent before dawn. Both had been returned. Across the agreement, Nora had written 6 words in blue ink. I have nothing of yours to sell. They're waiting, Mr. Whitmore, his chief of staff said from the doorway. Behind her, leather chairs creaked as directors took their places. Julian looked at Evan's photograph beside his closed laptop. Then he removed his silver CEO badge, set it on the table, and stood. Cancel the meeting. By 8:03, a black sedan was carrying him away from Midtown Steel Towers. The rain sharpened against the windows. He had spent years making people come to him, employees, ministers, investors, men who measured hesitation in market losses. That morning, he crossed the city without an appointment. Nora's neighborhood smelled of wet concrete, coffee, and bread warming inside a corner bakery. Delivery trucks groaned at the curb. Julian stepped from the sedan without an umbrella and found Nora outside a brick apartment building, one hand gripping a paper grocery bag, the other holding a phone to her ear. Yes, she said quietly. I understand the insurance ends with the suspension. She saw him and stopped. A carton of eggs shifted inside the bag. You shouldn't be here. I should have spoken last night. 2 neighbors slowed beneath the laundromat awning. A bus hissed at the corner. Julian's driver opened an umbrella, but Julian waved him back and remained in the rain, his charcoal suit darkening at the shoulders. Aurelia confirmed you took nothing, he said. No photograph. No recording. No story. Nora lowered her phone. You already knew that when your manager checked it. The words landed cleanly. Julian did not retreat behind an attorney's phrasing. He turned toward the building entrance, where the superintendent stood sorting mail, and raised his voice enough for everyone nearby to hear. Nora lost her job because I was ashamed to admit she helped me. The manager gave me the chance to protect her, and I chose my reputation instead. The grocery bag crackled beneath her tightening fingers. Your silence made me look guilty. Yes. It took my income. Yes. And my child's health insurance. Julian swallowed rain from his upper lip. Yes. No cameras waited. No board applauded. Only a delivery cyclist rattling over a pothole, the smell of detergent drifting from the laundromat, and Nora watching to see whether a powerful man could remain inside the truth after saying it aloud. Julian took out his phone and called Aurelia. When the night manager answered, Julian placed the call on speaker. Withdraw every accusation against Nora, he said. Record that she protected my privacy and that my silence caused her suspension. If your owners want confirmation, they can call me personally. He ended the call before anyone could bargain. Nora's phone rang seconds later. Aurelia's number glowed on the wet screen, but she did not answer. Julian had finally used his power to correct the public record. Yet when he offered her the sealed envelope in his coat, she looked at it without reaching. If that is money, Nora said, then you still haven't understood what I did for you. The rain ticked against the paper between them. Julian slowly lowered his hand. Rainwater ran from the envelope's corners and darkened the cream paper. Across the street, a city bus hissed at the curb, washing the sidewalk in red brake light before lumbering away. Nora took the envelope at last, but only to open it beneath the narrow apartment awning. Inside lay a cashier's check large enough to cover years of rent, along with an embossed letter appointing her Director of Human Dignity Initiatives at Whitmore Global. No department, no staff, no authority. A polished title designed to make gratitude look like reform. Julian's chief of staff held an umbrella behind him, its black fabric trembling in the cold wind. Julian waved it away. The position can become whatever you want, he said, and the check has no conditions. Nora studied the silver signature at the bottom of the letter. Then she folded both documents along the same sharp crease. They already have a purpose, she said. They let you leave here believing you fixed me. She pressed them back into his palm. The wet paper felt soft between their hands. Julian glanced toward the laundromat window, where white sheets rolled behind fogged glass and Nora's unanswered phone continued vibrating in her coat pocket. Aurelia will reinstate you, he said. Your insurance can continue. You don't have to lose anything else because of me. I won't be going back. The words landed beneath the metallic drip of the fire escape. Julian's fingers closed around the ruined envelope. You need that job. I need work, Nora replied. That is not the same as needing to return to a place that punished me for treating you like a human being. Her hand tightened around the strap of her worn canvas bag. Turning down Aurelia meant giving up immediate income, restored benefits, and the easiest path back to stability. She did it without raising her voice, without bargaining, without allowing his wealth to rename surrender as rescue. Julian looked at the check again. Then tell me what would make this right. Nora stepped from beneath the awning. Rain dotted her hair and cooled the skin along her face. She pointed to the appointment letter in his hand. You created a position with no power because it costs less than asking why Evan needed permission to fall apart. The boy's name changed Julian's posture. His shoulders drew back as if a boardroom door had opened behind him. Don't use my son to punish me. I'm not punishing you. Nora moved closer, leaving only the wet envelope between them. I'm refusing to help you hide behind me. The chief of staff lowered the umbrella. Traffic whispered over slick asphalt. You keep asking what I want, Nora continued. Ask what Evan wanted. Ask what happened when he told you people inside your company were breaking under rules with your name on them. Julian's jaw tightened. You know nothing about those conversations. I know he tried to make you listen. For the first time, Nora's voice caught, but she did not look away. And I know what it costs when powerful men call suffering weakness until someone they love cannot carry it anymore. Julian stared at her as rain blurred the ink of his signature. The money could replace wages. The title could repair appearances. Neither could purchase the answer waiting behind Evan's name. Nora turned toward her apartment entrance, choosing uncertainty over becoming evidence of Julian's generosity. At the door, she stopped and faced him once more. If you want to honor what happened in that room, don't save me, Julian. Find out what your son was trying to save people from. Then the lock clicked behind her, leaving him in the rain with a worthless check, an empty title, and a question his fortune could not silence. The elevator bell cut through the marble lobby at 8:17 the next morning, sharp and metallic beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. Julian stepped out of Whitmore Global's headquarters carrying Evan's old laptop, its aluminum case cold against his palm. The building smelled of polished stone and burnt coffee. Behind the security desk, employees lowered their voices as he passed. On the 46th floor, Julian entered a glass conference room and set the laptop beside a stack of printed personnel reports. He had spent the night reading Evan's emails. Not summaries, not executive briefings. Every word. One sentence appeared 11 times across 3 months. People are not efficiency units. At 8:24, Julian called Nora. I found his warnings, he said. Silence breathed through the line, threaded with traffic and the distant hiss of a city bus. Then you found only half of it, Nora replied. 40 minutes later, she entered the building wearing the same dark coat from the rain. She carried a dented file box against her ribs. No apron, no access card, no need to ask permission. Julian dismissed security with a raised hand and opened the conference room himself. Nora placed the box beneath the white glare of the ceiling panels. Paper scraped cardboard as she removed payroll statements, medical appeals, and a Whitmore Global employee badge bearing her late husband's photograph. Julian stopped breathing for a beat. Your husband worked here? 7 years. Nora slid a letter across the glass. Its edges were soft from being handled too often. He supervised 32 people in regional logistics. When your performance policy changed, managers were ordered to cut the lowest 10% every quarter. It didn't matter whether the team was profitable. Someone had to be marked as failing. Julian recognized the approval code at the bottom. His own initials sat beside it in black ink. Nora opened another folder. Her husband had documented employees working through medical leave, hiding panic attacks in restroom stalls, and refusing treatment because an absence could place them in the bottom tier. He had requested a formal review. Human Resources had classified his warning as resistance to restructuring. His promotion disappeared first. Then his insurance appeal stalled while he was ill. He needed that coverage, Nora said, pressing one finger against the denial notice. The ventilation system whispered above them. Julian looked from the date on the page to Evan's emails on the laptop. They were 6 weeks apart. Evan knew. My husband sent his report to every executive address he could find. Evan answered. Nora removed one final sheet. A printed email from Julian's son. I believe you. I'm trying to make my father see what this is doing to people. Julian lowered himself into a chair, but Nora remained standing. She had not come to comfort him this time. She had come to remove the last place where he could hide. My husband died believing nobody with power had listened, she said. Your son died believing the one person he needed to reach had chosen the company over him. Julian's fingers closed around the approval letter until the paper buckled. Are you saying my policy caused both deaths? I'm saying grief did not begin in that private dining room. It began wherever pain was measured against productivity and lost. Nora turned the laptop toward him. Evan's warnings glowed beside the denial stamped over her husband's medical appeal. No conspiracy connected them. No secret hand had selected either family. A culture had done it, quietly, legally, quarter after quarter, until suffering became a column no one wanted to read. The conference room doors opened. Julian's chief of staff stood there, face drained of color, holding a board notice. They know you accessed the archived files, the chief of staff said. Emergency session at noon. They want your answer before you enter. Julian took the notice. The board was offering one choice. Seal the records and remain CEO, or release them and surrender control of Whitmore Global. Nora closed the file box. but left the approval letter beneath Julian's hand. "Evan asked you to see people," she said. "At noon, they'll find out whether you finally can." At noon, the boardroom door sealed with a soft hydraulic hiss, shutting out the muted phones and polished footsteps of Whitmore Global's executive floor. Cold light washed across 40 feet of black walnut, while the ventilation system breathed recycled air over untouched coffee. Julian entered carrying Evan's emails, the denied medical appeal, and the approval letter bearing his own initials. Nora walked beside him, not behind him. 12 directors watched from leather chairs as the board chairman pushed a single-page resolution across the table. "Authorize the permanent sealing of those records," he said, "and you remain chief executive. Refuse, and your resignation takes effect today." Julian looked at Nora. For years, other people had turned his decisions into cleaner language. Legal necessity, fiduciary duty, competitive discipline. Now the paper beneath his hand offered the same disguise. "Tell them what you showed me," he said quietly. Nora did not touch the documents. Rain tapped the windows 70 floors above Manhattan, thin and steady against the glass. "No," she said. Several directors shifted. A fountain pen clicked once, then stopped. Nora held Julian's gaze. "I gave you a place where you didn't have to pretend you were strong. I will not give you a place to hide from choosing." The chairman leaned forward. "Ms. Nora, this is a corporate proceeding." "Then let the corporation hear its CEO answer for himself." Julian's chief of staff stood near the wall with a tablet pressed against his chest. The live stream window for the company-wide noon briefing waited on its screen. More than 60,000 employees were expecting a routine statement about leadership continuity. Julian picked up the sealing resolution. The paper trembled between his fingers, barely enough to make the embossed letterhead whisper. Then he tore it once. Cleanly. "Activate the broadcast," he told his chief of staff. The chairman rose so sharply his chair rolled backward across the carpet. "If you disclose privileged material, the board will remove you before the market closes." Julian placed both halves of the resolution on the table. "You won't need to." The tablet light changed from gray to red. Across offices, warehouses, and home workstations, screens filled with Julian's face. He named the forced-ranking policy. He acknowledged approving it. He described how medical leave had been punished, how health coverage had been used as leverage, and how warnings from employees, including Nora's late husband, had been buried. He did not blame counsel. He did not blame the board. When he spoke Evan's name, his voice broke, but he did not turn away from the camera. "My son tried to make me understand the human cost," Julian said. "I treated his compassion as inexperience. I was wrong." Phones began vibrating along the table. Market alerts, reporter requests, messages from major investors demanding containment. Julian removed his CEO identification card and laid it beside the torn resolution. "Effective immediately, I resign as chief executive of Whitmore Global." Before the chairman could cut the feed, Julian opened a second document. As the company's largest individual shareholder, he cast his voting shares to establish an independently administered employee mental health and medical leave protection fund. Its charter barred Whitmore executives from controlling the money and prohibited retaliation against workers seeking care. The commitment was permanent. So was the surrender of voting power attached to those shares. "You're destroying your influence," one director said. Julian signed. The scratch of the pen carried through the room. "Influence that protects itself by silencing pain deserves to be destroyed." The broadcast ended. His access badge flashed red when the chief of staff tested it against the door panel. Outside, camera shutters already rattled beyond the glass corridor, and Julian's phone displayed a collapsing share price beside headlines bearing his name. Nora lifted the file box from the table. She offered no praise and no rescue. Julian had finally made a choice no one could make for him. But as security unlocked the boardroom and the roar of waiting reporters rushed inside, a harder question stood between them. Without his office, his fortune's obedience, or the authority to command a room. What would Julian do with the humanity Nora had returned to him? Cold rain hissed against the glass entrance as camera flashes bleached the lobby white. The air smelled of wet wool, hot cables, and coffee abandoned hours ago. Security expected Julian Whitmore to retreat through the private garage. Instead, Nora set the file box on the marble floor and pushed open the front doors. "Walk out," she said. "Not behind me. Beside me." Julian stepped into the noise without an executive badge, prepared statement, or aid clearing his path. Questions struck from every direction. Had he resigned to protect himself? Was the fund an admission of liability? Did he blame the board? His old instincts rose visibly, shoulders squared, jaw locked, one hand lifting for silence. Then he looked at Nora. She did not answer for him. She simply placed the worn photograph of Evan into his open palm. Julian lowered his hand. "My son tried to teach me that suffering does not become less real because it is inconvenient to powerful people," he said. Microphones edged closer, their foam covers shining with rain. "Nora's husband warned my company. Evan warned me. I dismissed them both." A reporter called Nora a whistleblower. Another asked how much Julian had paid her. Nora stepped toward the microphones. Her waitress shoes darkened by water at the toes. "He offered me money," she said. "I returned it. He offered me a title. I returned that too." The crowd tightened. "Then what did you give him?" someone shouted. Nora glanced at Julian, but this answer belonged to her. Nothing he could keep in an account. She opened the file box and removed 2 copies of the buried warnings, her husband's appeal and Evan's email. Rather than hand them to the reporters, she gave them to the independent trustees appointed to oversee the new fund. It was a small movement, paper crossing 6 inches of cold air. Yet it changed the meaning of everything that had begun inside Aurelia's locked dining room. Nora had not saved Julian from grief. She had refused to let power turn grief into secrecy, money, or another command. She had given him a place where he did not have to perform strength, and then denied him every shortcut that might have turned her compassion into absolution. Weeks later, Aurelia's night manager withdrew every accusation against her under Julian's speakerphone order. Nora accepted the cleared record, but not her old position. With restored health coverage secured through a settlement and no ceremonial title attached, she joined the independent fund as an elected employee advocate, accountable to workers rather than Julian. At its first public meeting, no gold nameplate marked his seat. Julian sat in the back beneath plain fluorescent lights while employees spoke about medical leave, impossible rankings, and managers who treated panic like poor performance. He did not interrupt. He did not defend himself. He took notes until his fingers cramped. When the room emptied, he found Nora stacking metal chairs. "That night at Aurelia," he said, "I thought you were keeping me alive." A chair leg scraped across the tile. Nora folded the last one and met his eyes. "No, I was reminding you that being alive still required something from you." Julian placed Evan's photograph beside the 2 warnings in the fund's permanent record, not as evidence of his tragedy, but as proof of the voices he had once refused to hear. He had entered that room believing tears were the end of his strength. Nora showed him they were only the end of his disguise. She did not rescue a billionaire from sorrow. She made a man answer for what he did after the crying stopped.